When their review's happening, they don't know what they're getting measured against. They don't know what the reward is. They don't know how they're rewarded. They don't know what their salary band is. All of those things build anxiety and uncomfortability, and also a bit of a disbelief in the process and what they're even being measured about.
You've got no sense of ever achieving a waypoint.
We grew from 20 to almost 70 in less than a year. It was really, really hyper growth, and that was staggered across a year.
After years of working across recruitment agencies, creative industries, and tech startups, Charlotte Lamb stepped into the challenge of scaling teams herself, becoming head of people and talent at Togather and a mentor at Femme Palette UK. Now she's revealing what it really takes to hire exceptional people and build a culture where startups grow.
Someone else has probably done a job better than you have, and that is not an insult to anyone. That means that you don't have to come up with everything yourself. I've had a peer mentor, a senior mentor, and I'm mentoring someone at the moment myself. I will try and partner them with an external mentor that's going to be able to help them develop that, if not several, to be honest, because they can gain that experience that someone else has worked and had all that industry and life experience without necessarily having to leave and do it themselves. I want to keep them, I want to retain them and help them grow and gain that experience. Rituals with the ability to iterate is the crucial part.
Is there anything you sort of do specifically intentionally for mid-level managers in order to get them to operate optimally?
I think that
Hello, Charlotte. Welcome to The Power Between.
Thanks so much, Roddy. Really excited to be here.
Well, it's great to have you. I was just looking at your LinkedIn profile and see that a few years back you had a theatre sort of background, and you did, in fact, at university, I think you did theatre studies. And I'm always interested in how people started their careers to get to their current places. But I think that theatre, I've seen it in a number of people. In fact, the very first podcast we did was with
really?
Someone from the Ambassador Theatre Group and
yes, ATG, I know them.
ATG.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that's influenced your journey?
Well, I believe that careers are very much sort of squiggly lines. Some people have, straight trajectory, but a lot of us are still figuring out what we want to do and where we want to be, still within our 30s, 40s, 50s, probably even when you're retiring. Was that really what I wanted to do? I did have absolutely grand designs to be an actress from when I was in school right through uni, and really kind of dedicated to myself to that specific career path. I qualified through Lambda. I did RADA training. I did theatre at uni, as you've seen on my LinkedIn. That didn't pan out for me. It's obviously a very, very tough industry. But what I can say is the skills that I've learned and the confidence that it built within me, and being able to stand up on a stage and present and be able to try and, capture an audience and, be able to kind of lead in that way, has been incredibly helpful for me as I've kind of moved through my career, both when I've been consulting and therefore had to, advise and capture, really senior stakeholders' interest in a room and take them on a journey of, what we need to do and how we need to do it. And also in my sort of most recent job, when, we've really grown as a business and you have to stand at the front and give a presentation in front of people, which can be absolutely nerve-inducing for most of everyone, and still is for me. But those skills that I developed and being comfortable in that space has meant, I've really been able to invest in myself, building that confidence to be able to go up and stand in front of a room and present and talk and get people excited about the business, or, launching a new HRIS. It may not sound super exciting, but hopefully I can bring a bit of excitement to it.
No, I mean, I think it is. It's a hugely valuable skill for people. And often people who have gone through a sort of purely academic trajectory of learning don't acquire that. I mean, I know people get presentation training and stuff like that, but it's having it sort of grounded as part of your formation early on, I think is probably a really useful thing to do. I was just going to say, I'm pretty comfortable doing this in front of a camera, but in the safety of my own office. But standing up in front of people in the open is a different order of anxiety.
But it's a skill and a muscle that you can develop, much like anything else. And it is just, I think the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. So very fortunate to have done that. And I do think that the people and talent space is just such a melting pot of people from different backgrounds. I don't think you'll speak to one recruiter, talent person, people person, HR person, whatever kind of sector you're within, that would say, I knew when I was 16 I wanted to work in human resources. That's just not naturally something that tends to happen. People very much fall into this industry. And that's such a joy because people then come at it from such different perspectives and different mindsets. And, you see that when you do psychometric tests and people's, different ways of working and how they approach things. And there are some incredibly really, data and mathematical and product led HR people, which has been a huge wave that's come through the people space at the moment, with people looking at the industry from a product lens and how you iterate and evolve and manage things, and other people like myself who've come from very much people focused, sort of stage focused. I like to build excitement, I like to build brand engagement, I like the kind of creative side of it. I want to be in interviews all the time hyping up my our place of work and getting other people excited about it. And there's people from every single angle working within the space, and so we all have very, very different backgrounds. I don't think any two of us will be the same.
Interestingly, the companies that you've been with have been quite sort of performative in any case, haven't they? I mean, you've been in advertising businesses, and then Togather now, which is an event sort of based business. Tell us a bit about those.
That's always just been a real personal passion. I've always very much cared about the creative industries, but despite an acting background, I'm not a creative person, or at least not someone who can produce creative work. So sort of tried to wangle my way in there by working within businesses that do that, whilst my role has some elements of creative, but it's a people focused and a culture role. And again, that's the whole squiggly line really where I'm at now. Together, we're an events business. We curate street food and drink lineups for massive music festivals across the country, large scale stadia, big events that I would always go to as a consumer, that I am a customer of those events, that I'm very passionate about it. I'm a foodie through and through. It's so aligned with my personal brand. I've never worked in a business where I overhear them talking about a project that we're working on, and I want to chime in because I'm like, oh God, I've been to that festival every year and I care so much about that, and I am a customer, and wiggling my way up through the years into being somewhere which fulfills me personally and professionally is a really great place to be. And that did start out through a career in recruitment. I mean, at the time I was working in a bar, which I did love, to be fair, but that's very much a young man's game in my early 20s. And it was in a bar in Spinningfields in Manchester, where there were a lot of really big recruitment companies, and we'd often get a lot of the sort of high level recruiters coming in for lunch, and they would always say to me, you'd be a great recruiter. And they were all from like the JP Morgans and the big corporate businesses. And I thought, maybe I could be a recruiter, but I don't want to recruit accountants or for oil or, because I'm not invested in that. So I did my research and I reached out to a recruitment agency that specialized in marketing and creative. And I worked there for nearly 4 years, and really immersed myself in that industry, but from the flip side of it, by effectively being a supplier or a service. But living and breathing the agency world, understanding the big players, understanding the roles within it, how it all functioned. And whilst I loved recruitment, I felt that there was something missing from it, because you get someone a job and then you wish them good luck, and then you probably don't really speak to them much.
The last you see of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it felt all a little bit too transactional for me, whereas I'm a very people driven person, and I would fundamentally care about those people and their success. And I had a wonderful manager, Jonathan Robinson, who was such a coacher and a leader, and directed me towards doing CIPD, which is sort of the most reputable HR qualification. So I followed through with that to sort of bolster the flip side that I was missing, that sort of people and talent piece. And I got hired by one of my clients at the time, who I'd placed a lot of roles with, had developed a really good relationship with, knew the business inside out because I'd hired a lot of people there. And that was a really big agency in the event space. One of their big clients was Amex. And so they were always doing the Amex sponsorships at the time. I think it was with things like All Points East and Wimbledon, and really, really big events. So for me, again, that was a real personal passion, but that company was 500 or 600 people big. It was massive. I was very much, I was a cog in a wheel, and whoever came before me or after me would have been doing the exact same job with very little ability to sort of change or implement things. It was a wonderful foundation for my experience and a great sort of segue into working within the event space. But I didn't quite feel that fulfillment that I now feel from this role, where, you know, we've scaled from 20 to 50 people, and I've had such a fundamental part in shaping every part of people, every part of culture, every part of the talent and recruitment process, all of it. And that is just very fulfilling place to be.
So what sort of size is Togather then?
So we're 50 now. As many startups, we went through hyperscale when I first joined. I joined at about 20 people. We did grow to 70 at one point, which was a stretch for a one-person people team. At that point, I
can imagine that.
Yeah, at that point, I was like, I might need some help here. But you know, we grew, idealistically grew. And actually, you know, over time, we've sort of stayed at more the kind of 50 point. We have unfortunately gone through a couple of redundancies, but the company remains really strong as we've had to kind of pivot to meet the needs of the sector and the demands of our clients. So it's been a real evolution in different stages of growth across the business.
I mean, is it quite sort of seasonal then? I mean, if it's a sort of event based, do you grow, or do you take on lots more people sort of during the summer?
In theory. So the first year, I think that there's a certain cycle that startups go through in general. They all go through investment at the end of the year, and then you go into January and you're like, right, we're hiring 30 roles, which is a really intense place to be as a talent person, that you're not sort of staggering
exactly.
it.
You're on the hot spot on that one.
Yeah. You know, my first year with the business, and I that was post-pandemic, so 2021, we went through that hyperscale. So, you know, we grew from 20 to almost 70 in, I think, less than a year. It was really, really hyper growth, and that was staggered across a year. Typically, we do hire freelance sort of seasonally, but the way that we work is unlike a festival business who has one festival that you work, you know, your whole year towards, and then, you know, that's one weekend and then it's done and then you move on to the next. We work with a portfolio of clients. So we do have a sort of peak season for our event producers in the summer when most of the festivals and things happen. But, you know, we work with football stadia, we work with Christmas light trails, we, you know, are doing all of those kind of different events as well. So we've built up a pretty constant stream of events. So effectively the whole year is peak season really for us.
Which is, I mean, that's sort of exhausting, isn't it? And because, I mean, events, whether it's a show or whatever in a theatre or a festival, there's so much energy invested in it, and so much has to just come together at exactly the right time.
Absolutely. God bless the event producers.
If you're doing one festival a year, then you know that there may be a week or so afterwards that you're sort of unpacking it and putting it all back to bed. But then there is a lull. And if you don't get that lull, and I'm increasingly fascinated, and I think it's something that really affects people in the middle of organizations, is that ability to create a bit of space, a bit of rhythm in that. Is that something that you sort of are actively aware of in the business, that you need to give people time to breathe before the concentrated sort of peak periods? And then
it's a real challenge actually as a people person. It's something that we've just started doing in the business. We used to do reviews and our performance reviews from start date, and we did that from start date so that from a manager perspective the timings were staggered throughout the year, so you never had a bulk of reviews that sort of knocked out a week or so of your time, because no one could really afford to lose a full week at that time. So we always had it from start date. We recently moved company-wide to twice a year, and that goes in March, April time, and October time. So that is sort of the either side of what we would call the peak summer season. Because
but is everyone being reviewed, or is it
everyone is now
twice a year?
Twice a year, yeah.
Right.
So whole company, and we've shifted to do that because it does just give a better ability to calibrate scores and be able to look at things fairly and make sure everyone's going through the same process with the same criteria and being assessed in the same way. But we're only able to do it in those two times because of the events team, because they do have that peak season. We don't want to distract them. They do work incredibly hard, and building rituals is really important for them, because when they are on a field in the middle of nowhere with a walkie-talkie and working God knows how many hours a day to
the
to do
day.
stuff. Yeah, you want to be able to give some semblance of that, ritual and structure when they're in the office, so that they understand what they're coming back to, and there's no hidden surprises for them.
That ritual part is really interesting. I mean, and that's something you actively work into the system, do you? The process.
Trying to. I think it's a really it's difficult to get the right balance. I think as a people person, my firm belief is that rituals and structure and process, although with the ability to kind of stretch and flex, is really important, because you want people to know what they're getting and you want them to feel like it's fair. And fairness is really important across the business. Make sure that you're removing bias as much as possible, and that everyone feels that they're being treated in the same way. On the flip side to that, it is a startup and we have to pivot a lot, and things do change, and we're still evolving and growing and learning and finding out what works for us. So I would say rituals with the ability to iterate is the crucial part. Yeah.
But there's sort of points in the calendar, aren't, that people can sort of navigate themselves by, I suppose.
Exactly.
And that's a really human requirement, I think, that we otherwise, without them, I think that exhaustion comes in much more quickly, because you've got no sense of ever achieving a waypoint, as it were. You're just constantly running.
The unknown builds a huge amount of anxiety within people, and that clarity is super important. The kind of 3 pillars that I work across in Ability are clarity, transparency, and fairness. And then those are 3 kind of rules that I try and embed in every part of way of working. And when people, they don't know when their review's happening, they don't know what they're getting measured against, they don't know what the reward is, they don't know how they're rewarded, they don't know what their salary band is, all of those things build anxiety and uncomfortability, and also a bit of a disbelief in the process and what they're even being measured about. So building any kind of ritual, whether it's those sort of reviews or the socials that we do or whatever we have, having them double down on the consistency of what they are, and having them be sort of reliable measures, hopefully removes as much of that uncertainty as possible.
And the other part is that, being 50 or sort of 50 to 70 is a really nice size of business, because you presumably everyone knows everyone, at least by name, if not sort of working closely with each other. And that brings a sense of sort of cohesion and family, I suppose, to an extent.
It's absolutely my personal sweet spot of business size. Have you worked in sort of different sized businesses before?
Well, I started out in a reasonable sized publishing business, which was probably a couple of hundred.
Nice.
But I've always been quite good at working sort of outside the team.
Yeah.
And then started running my own publishing business, which has never had more than sort of 10, 15 people in it. And then
hopefully you know everyone when it's 10 or 15 people.
You need to know everyone. If you don't know everyone in a 10, 15 type business, you're not doing the work, really. But increasingly, and I suppose this is what it's more like, I work with lots of freelancers, but I mean, it's not... So my business now is much more, I don't know how you describe it, but I mean, it's very freelance related. But the relationships can be enduring and going on for years and years. It's just that you don't all sit in the same office together.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. It's something that we're starting to look at as freelancers. So I've personally found the sort of between 30 to 50 people-sized businesses a real... I guess like personal sweet spot, because as you said, you know everyone. I don't know the detail of everyone's business. I have to sort of rely on managers for that, and to be able to, for them to manage their teams down. But you do know everyone, you know their aspirations, you can get really sort of comfortable with it. And getting up to 70, of course, I still knew everyone, because I'd hired everybody, but it becomes a bit of you're stretched a little bit thin at that point. And when you're part of a bigger business, that's when you might start having business partners that would own their own separate area, which was my experience when I worked within the larger agencies. You would look after the design team, or you might look after the engineers and product, which is also great because you get to develop those really close relationships, but it doesn't give you the full oversight of the business, which I think that's why I love that sort of that size business. You have the full perspective across all of the different departments, and you can work really closely with everyone. we have started extending our freelance support because we are now, fortunately, winning so many new events. And as I said, with this portfolio of the team working across so many events, they can't be at 5 different festivals on a weekend. And we don't want to do that to them. We want to really support them and make sure they have as good a work-life balance as possible. So we have a wonderful delivery director who manages our events team. He joined us last year and has started sort of leveraging freelancers more so that we can work across a wider portfolio of events whilst not stretching our permanent team. And as something that was sort of new, there were very much sort of people that were hired on site, in and out in a day, and that was that. But what we really do want to do, we've worked with some amazing people now, really, really talented freelancers who get our business. We know they're going to do a great job. And I don't think it's fair for them to just sort of have, here's a contract, go do, we'll message you when you need again. They are an extension of your business. They are experiencing your business, even if it's just for a couple of days. And, we're in the process of trying to design and develop what our relationship with them should look like. How do they understand our business? How do they represent us on site? How are they then going back out to their freelance network and champion us, saying, actually, if you're a freelancer, you probably should go and work for Togather, and what that looks like. So it's building the freelance employer brand and the freelance people experience, which is not something I've done a huge amount before, but quite interested to.
But lots of these, particularly sort of creative people, but lots of people with that, sort of technical backgrounds that might apply in these kinds of roles, presumably pretty independent kinds of people, and they want to go off and do lots of different things in any case, don't they? There's a balance there of what they want to do and how it fits their lifestyles.
Oh, yes. And if you work freelance, a lot of that is because, you want to be an independent person, running your own life. We absolutely, wonderful to those people. I personally would not be able to do that. I really need the security of a permanent job. Yeah. But it's about, respecting that from them, but also understanding that they are part of something and ensuring that you're looking after them in the best way possible. It can be really difficult working on site. They're in all sorts of really challenging environments. And it's one thing when you're doing it for your permanent employer and you're working towards a long-term goal as a startup. You're building a business hopefully to be acquired because you're pushing forward for the mission and the vision of the business. But when you're a freelancer, as you said, you might not necessarily care about that a huge amount, but you're still going through the trials and tribulations that you would working on site. So they still need that support system and hopefully to still feel a bit of a part of something.
And I suppose, looking at this through the prism of the power between, which is looking at people who are sort of have got team leadership roles in organizations, that becomes trickier if a lot of the people that you're leading or that you're responsible for mid-management role are not actually direct employees and they're here for this week, but they'll have gone again by next week. That's a really unusual dynamic, I suspect, to be able to master.
It's so challenging. It's a completely different approach when you're a manager of, permanent employees. But one of the biggest parts of your role is to invest in them, help them grow, give them feedback, think of them long term. What are their long term goals? How can you help them reach that? And, really do that not just through reviews, but, consistent one-to-ones and all of the tools that you have as a manager to help develop that person. When you're working with someone freelance, you can help develop them if they want that, but most of the time they're in to do a job and they're out. And you don't have those tools either way. You don't have the carrot or the stick necessarily. The carrot might be that you employ them again, and the stick might be that you don't. But you're not necessarily in a position to sort of correct behavior or, share more constructive feedback. It is a lot more of a challenging position to be in, for sure. It's why the hiring of them has to be so bang on.
But presumably also why repeat taking them on.
If you found a good one, keep a hold of them.
you want to keep a hold of them.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to increasingly become a familiar way of working, I think, as companies become sort of perhaps lighter on their sort of infrastructure of people that they employ. And also people seem to want to have more mobility, more independence.
It's the bread and butter of the events world. As we were saying, there are a few businesses like us, events agencies and other concessions companies who have that portfolio of events, which means you're busy all year. But that is quite a unique position to be in. And if you are, Glastonbury, for example, everyone knows Glastonbury. You don't need to be employing 20 event producers all year round, because they're going to have 9 months where they're twiddling their thumbs and they're not going to have anything to do. And so they employ so many people that weekend. I don't even know the number, but it will be in the hundreds, if not in the thousands, of people who work on that site alone for that weekend. And they are happening across the summer, and hopefully they get paid decent day rates. But yes, absolutely, like the events world wouldn't be able to function without freelancers.
Yeah, so that ecosystem is intriguing. And I mean, we're putting together a quarterly magazine, Developing Leaders Quarterly. It's coming up for its 50th issue, and we're going to rather grandiosely call it the Hollywood issue.
Wonderful, I love that.
To try and get some glitz into it. But effectively what we're looking at, and it is that ecosystem, because Hollywood operates like that. There are a few big mega production houses, but most people work independently or for small outfits as either as directors or actors, as the top talent, or as people who are supporting in roles. That's been in place working in Hollywood for the better part of 100 years, that kind of ecosystem. This is very similar, I think. There are lots of people who are particularly able at their specific roles, but have to work for different employers in order to be kept. That Glastonbury issue, that you can't be a producer all year round at Glastonbury, so you have to go and work elsewhere
and maintain your reputation, and continue
lots of reputation management. So I think it's a really fascinating dynamic. But from your side, within it, and you, as you say, you're working throughout the year on this, it brings its challenges. In terms of people in the middle of organizations, though, are they, do you do sort of anything specifically to support them in dealing with that sort of fragmented nature of the work through the year?
Are managers employing freelancers?
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. And I mean, it's lots of little bits of project work, presumably, is the...
Yeah. Well, we have, as I said, we've got an amazing delivery director who has a real strength in project management. So he spent the time investing in his, a team of permanent event producers in project management, and I've worked alongside him to make sure that they have the right KPIs and metrics that they're being assessed against to drive the right performance, whether that's making sure that we repeat with those clients, that they come back to us because they've done a great job working on site, or whether it's making sure that we're looking at the reports and the detail and data analysis that they're doing, but making sure that they have those metrics that drive the right sort of permanent behaviors. Now, what we did with freelancers last year, mainly it was done by the sort of department heads, but we started to delegate that down to the event producers, who would be that sort of more middle management, or perhaps even first-time managers. They've never managed anyone full-time permanently, but now they're starting to manage freelancers, and being able to give them the ability to go out and speak to them, harden themselves with, a little bit of gentle support from me, but it's, you're able to, I think, delegate hiring and talent management a lot easier when it comes to freelance, because there is slightly less at stake, or at least legally less at stake if it goes awry. So I really want to, I might handhold someone going through the permanent hiring process as, becoming a first-time manager and hiring that person. But if they're hiring a freelancer, I'll give them the sort of, bare bones of what they need to know, and I'll, hopefully let them fly and learn through it themselves. And I think that that's, one of the best ways to do things. Now, doing that for the first time last year, there were some learnings. For the vast majority, it went brilliantly. There are sometimes some people that end up on site that maybe don't have the best reputation that you couldn't catch, and we want to iterate and learn and evolve this year. So we're building a bit more structure into how we do freelancers. And I mean, call out for anyone in the people world, there used to be a great tool to hire and manage freelancers called Juno. I mean, must be over a decade ago. I haven't found anything since. So trying to develop our own internal process of finding and managing all of these freelancers, and there are hundreds of them on our books now. So supporting the sort of middle managers a lot more with that process, and really giving them the tools that they need to make it easy for them. But
also giving middle managers that agency to do those roles. is quite empowering too, isn't it?
Listen, they know more about what they're going to do on site than I do, and I wouldn't sort of condescend to them to tell them what they should know. They absolutely know that, and that's the brief. The brief is someone supporting them doing their job, and that's not something that I would assess or pretend to know more about than those people. They are the experts, and that's something that's really great about our culture within this business specifically is we do trust everyone with their expertise, whether they're an intern or a director. I trust that an event intern is probably going to know more about events than I do. And I want to empower them with that. I want to give them, as you said, that agency, that independency to find someone that they want. I can guide them on how to interview, the questions you can ask to kind of dig deeper, be kind of present in that way. But I'm never going to take away the independency they'll have over their own event expertise.
But I mean, trying to create that sense for people in the middle of organizations that they have their purpose is not just necessarily to complete the event that's directly in front of them. There's this broader organizational. Is that something that's well communicated from the top, do you think?
We try. I would say as a startup and a growing startup, two of our biggest pillars are autonomy and ownership. So whilst I'll support sort of mid-level managers right through to senior, because a lot of our senior managers are first-time managers as well. They grew within this business. They might be C-suite, but
what's the sort of age range in Together?
I mean, I'm one of the oldest. I'm probably the third or fourth oldest in the business. I'm 37, 38. Forgot how old I am now.
That tells us how old you are. You've got to stop and think about it.
Well, I mean, it's people will have had incredible careers because they started, as a manager. Maybe it was their first or second job. They'd never managed a team before, and as I said, they're now leading whole departments, which is an incredible space to be, but has meant that we've had to have a focus on hiring people and also encouraging people to be autonomous, to develop ownership and be quite self-driven. I will support and kind of encourage people to do their own learning and development and make sure that we have the budget for it and we can signpost it and support them in the right way, and make sure that when we're having, leadership conversations, that we're able to be vulnerable with each other and kind of hack those problems that they might have together. But is there super structured L&D? No. Do we have like a management learning course, for the basics? No, it's very much kind of built around the individual because we're at a size where we're able to do that.
And that's the critical point, isn't it? That you are at a size where you can still be pretty personalized about people's development because you have enough of an insight into everyone, particularly everyone sort of from mid-level upwards, presumably.
Exactly.
But that's really interesting about the age dynamic.
I know.
Because it means that not many people will have been imbued with other ways of working. No one will have spent 15 years at another company, really.
No, it's a challenge with the industry as a whole, to be honest. The space that we're operating in and the space that we often hire people from with, concessions within the live event space, especially music festivals and sporting entertainment, those big events, really the volume that exists within the UK has only happened in the past 10 years. I mean, you've got the big old school companies, the AEG, the Live Nation, the Ticketmaster. As a 40-person startup, there is no way we could afford to hire one of their directors. We wouldn't be able to pay the salary that they have working for that massive international business and having been there for years. And outside of those, really core large-scale businesses, everything else is pretty new. It's a newer industry. It's a newer industry that's become so sizable and has become such a massive part of the UK economy. It's rare to find someone who's been in it for, 20, 30, 40 years because it just hasn't really necessarily been around that long. Yeah.
But that gives a sort of dynamism that, you're always in the beginner's mindset to an extent. I mean, people can, as you say, people have been there for 10 years, which doesn't make them beginners. But the sort of parameters and perceived ways of doing things are probably far less embedded. So that experimentalism and, it's a creative space in any case, and it's quite sort of edgy space in as much as people want to try doing different things.
Exactly.
If every festival was exactly the same as the other one, then it wouldn't work.
Every time I try and build and launch a process, people want to tear it down because they want to do whatever they want to do anyway.
But that's quite invigorating, isn't it?
Well,
it may be frustrating for you, but
yeah. I think it's always important to critique and evolve, but there is a turning point I'm already feeling, of our business where we're going through. We've had a lot of experimental times. We've launched, we've iterated, we've evolved, we've changed, we've figured out sort of what works for us. And I would say that really over the course of the next couple of years, I see us going through more of a maturing phase where things that worked, we, embed to become these rituals. Things that don't work, we relaunch, but with a real kind of learning and formality attached to it. So the sort of flexibility, autonomy, that will still always need to exist, but the way that we work will start to become more, there'll be a together way of doing it that will be a way that we know works and we're happy to sort of launch people on.
Yeah, but I mean, you said earlier that when you work for a large events company that was much better established.
No change.
In terms of the atmosphere in that was clearly very different from the atmosphere where you've got there's something very special
the
about
sweet spot.
that sweet spot. It's quite difficult, I suspect, to keep hold of that magic when you have to start putting in structures, which you inevitably do if the business size evolves to over 150 people or something like that.
Absolutely. Listen, I think the ability to be in a company where you can always evolve and change processes and do that collaboratively with the wider business is, so great. I get feedback from every single person about how we do reviews, not just, how is your review, but the review process, the measurements, we're always evolving that and we'll always continue to. And, being in a place where, this is how it's done. Here's your playbook, off you go, don't change anything. That's not where I ever want to be. But I think that there will become a point where you've tried and you've evolved quite a few things, and then you kind of need to settle into a little bit of a rhythm. And people get change fatigue almost after a while.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah, you got to just be mindful of how you frame things.
So what are your sort of insights or top tips perhaps for creating that sense in the middle of organizations that people have? And it's probably less important in a 50-person business because everyone can see what their impact is to an extent. Is there anything you sort of do specifically intentionally for mid-level managers that sort of in order to get them to operate optimally?
I trust them and I listen to them. And I think that comes, that's across the entire business, but definitely for those middle managers, because they'll be at the point where they're starting to think about, where do I want to go? Do I want to be a manager? Do I want to be a team leader? Do I want to be an individual contributor? What are the skills that I want to develop? And we can point them in the right direction. We can create the frameworks and processes for them to be able to learn and evolve. But they'll know what they want to do. They'll know their own passions. They'll know their own weak spots, and they'll know their own strengths, hopefully more than anyone else will. And being able to trust them with their own ability, but also listen to them and listen to what they need and what they're trying to figure out and what they're trying to kind of challenge themselves with. That I think is always the most important thing.
And I think there's an element of mentoring in there, isn't there?
Oh, I was going to say, I think one of the big things with that is, especially because we have more junior managers, they have their line managers, obviously, who are incredible people, who are highly talented. But again, they don't have that huge amount of experience, industry experience, maybe we would say, or, sort of life experience. I am a firm believer someone else has probably done a job better than you have. And that's not an insult to anyone. That means that you don't have to come up with everything yourself. And I have put it on myself to have external mentors. I've had a peer mentor, a senior mentor, and I'm mentoring someone at the moment myself. And all of that is learning from what someone else has probably done better than me. So especially when these managers are considering developing in one skill, I will try and partner them with an external mentor that's going to be able to help them develop that, if not several, to be honest, because they can gain that experience that someone else has worked and had all that industry and life experience without necessarily having to leave and do it themselves. I want to keep them, I want to retain them and help them grow and gain that experience, but still here.
You're mentoring someone else yourself, are you? Without sort of obviously breaching any confidences, but I mean, what's the pattern of that? Is that how regularly do you? Is that someone in the organisation, or is it someone external?
No, it's someone externally. I joined a great mentoring company called Femme Palette, which is for women across the world in tech. And to be honest, it's more of she wanted to match with me because of my experience within startups and AI and kind of growth framework launching that I've done. But honestly, I treat it more of a peer mentorship. There's as much that I can learn from her as she can learn from me, and I really value that time. I'm actually catching up with her on Friday, and our mentorship period ended, and we still continue to catch up because,
okay,
especially being a sole people person in a business, you can sometimes feel like you're the only person.
You're quite lonely there.
Yeah. It's a great reminder that if you exchange a story, someone goes, "Oh, that happened to me last week." And building that network, I think, is invaluable. And I know that if I feel that from a people perspective, an event producer or a marketing manager or somebody else will feel exactly the same, and they can really benefit from having that network of people who are able to support them.
Charlotte, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and exploring this world, which is largely unknown to me. So, but I think there are all sorts of really intriguing dynamics there, applicable and transferable to lots of other situations as well, and will increasingly become so. So, Charlotte, thank you very much indeed.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely to chat.